The sky was the color of ash that morning, and the wind moved like an old man's sigh across the quiet frontier town. I sat at the window with a chipped mug of chicory coffee in my palms, steam curling like breath from something barely alive. Snow dusted the dirt roads, just enough to hush the world beneath it. From that window, I watched two figures step into the town square like ghosts. They wore bonnets too thin for December. Prairie dresses clung to their knees from the wind, and their boots sank into the snow like they didn't belong anywhere. The older one, jaw tight, shoulder square, walked one step ahead. The younger girl kept glancing around, her hands cradling her belly like something fragile might break loose. Both were pregnant, both alone, and not a soul stepped forward to greet them. Sheriff Harland was already out there with his wide stance and leather ledger. He read from a crinkled paper, his voice flat. Their guardian, a traveling preacher named Silas Kerrigan, had stolen from the church treasury and fled, left the sisters behind. No family came forward to claim them. No man admitted to the children in their bellies, and the town had no intention of taking them in. Cora Bell stood at the steps of the chapel, her gloved hand resting just so over her corset like judgment itself. I saw the way her eyes narrowed, then flicked to the whispers starting near the general store. Another shameful tale, Hiram Tate muttered. Should send him east, or let him walk into the desert. Can't just let him sit here like wet dogs. Junie, the younger, swayed where she stood. Her eyes welled up, and when a boy tossed a pebble at her feet, she jumped hard enough that her shawl slipped to the ground. The whole square fell silent. Her hands shook as she bent to pick it up. That was when I felt it again. That hollowness behind the ribs. That cold ache that don't come from winter, but from remembering. Mine was named Henry, born blue and quiet, buried beneath an aspen tree. The town brought flowers for a week, then never spoke his name again. I learned quick that grief had a curfew in places like this. Some women are built like stone fences, meant to withstand weather, but never meant to be noticed. Others, like those girls, were built like windows, too open, too easy to break. The judge hadn't even arrived, and already Cora was whispering with two other women about how they should be sent to the workhouse down near Junction Pass. Or better yet, she added with a brittle smile, let the miners have him. That's where girls like that belong. I held my mug tighter. There wasn't fire in me anymore. Not like before. Not since Elias passed. I'd grown quieter, slower. Learned that a woman speaking up only made folks listen less. But watching those girls tremble in plain sight, pregnant and abandoned like discarded baskets of sin, I could feel something in me shift. Delaney, the older one, didn't flinch when the sheriff finished speaking and walked away. She just stared out, eyes like burnt wood, too dry for tears. Junie looked at her sister for direction, but Delaney said nothing. Just stood there, cold, bare, stained in the eyes of everyone who turned to look. I thought about how many times I'd stood alone, too. The night after Elias's funeral, I'd stood in that same square and asked the Lord what he wanted from a barren woman who'd done everything right and still ended up alone. The answer had never come. God don't bless two wombs carrying sin, someone murmured behind Cora. The girls had nowhere to go, no coin, no papers. The preacher who brought them to town had called them his nieces. Now he was gone, and no one could prove anything except that they were young and full of shame. I stood up from my chair, folded my shawl around my shoulders. It had been years since I went to town for anything more than flour. But some silences you can't sit through. Some mornings the soul just rises up and says go. I didn't speak as I stepped down the porch. Just the crunch of snow under my boots and the pull of the wind on my skirts. By the time I reached the square, the sheriff had vanished, and the crowd had lost interest, mostly. But not Cora. She watched me walk straight toward the girls. Her mouth curled into something I didn't like. The same curl she gave me when my baby died, and she brought a cake I never asked for. The crowd shifted. I could feel the eyes. They weren't sure what I'd do. I didn't speak. Not yet. I stepped between Delaney and Junie and looked down at them both. Delaney's chin raised, ready for a slap that wouldn't come. Junie looked like a fawn in winter. I held out my hand. No one breathed. Even the wind stopped to listen. If you want shelter and silence, I said, I have both. Junie's lip trembled. She nodded so fast it looked like a bow. Delaney didn't move. Her jaw worked, her fingers twitching at her sides. But she didn't speak either. Just reached out, slow and unsure, and took my hand. And that's when the whispers started. Cora gasped like someone had died. Hiram spat on the ground. One man muttered something about witches and sinners. But I didn't flinch. Didn't look back. We walked through the crowd like saints or ghosts. Me in the middle, girls at either side, bellies rounded with the weight of choices they never asked to carry. We didn't speak a word. Didn't need to. By the time we reached the edge of town, my wagon was already waiting. The old mare, Maggie, stomped her hooves in the snow. A black crow landed on the post nearby and cawed just once like it knew what was happening. I helped Junie up. Delaney climbed on her own, sat with her hands folded over her belly like a shield. I took the reins in my hands and looked once more at the town behind us. The chapel steeple stood tall. The doors shut. No prayers for girls like them. And maybe that was all right, because sometimes mercy don't come with hymns and hallelujahs. Sometimes it comes from a widow with a half-frozen garden and more rooms than she knows what to do with. We rode out in silence. The snow kept falling. The wind pushed against our backs like it was glad we were leaving. That day, the town let them go like waste. But I took them like seed. My land was dry, but something told me it could bloom again. Maybe you felt it too, that bitter kind of silence when folks look through you like you ain't even flesh. But let me tell you something, sweetheart, dignity doesn't need a witness. Sometimes it just needs a porch light, a bowl of stew, and someone who sees past your shame. I wasn't a saint. Wasn't brave either. Just a woman with a quiet ranch, a wide heart, and a barn door that don't lock. And for those girls, that was enough.